My name's Brandon and this is Nickelodeon Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Nickelodeon shows and retrospectively review them. The second entry in our Ren and Stimpy video game cavalcade is Stimpy's Invention. Released on June 15th, 1993, I think, there are roughly 500 million different release dates listed for this game on the internet. Some places say Vidiots came out first, while others say Stimpy's Invention was earlier. Who the hell knows what it actually is? Personally, I'm going with the June 15 date because Moby Games uses that, and of all the sources I looked at, they're easily the most reputable. Released for the SEGA Genesis / Mega Drive, not only does this make Stimpy's Invention the first ever Nickelodeon game on a Sega console, but it also means we've seen 3 different consoles for Nick's first 3 games. And we've got a new developer too. Blue Sky Software are at the helm here, who were active from 1988 to 2001. Before coming across the Ren and Stimpy license, they developed games based on The Little Mermaid and Jurassic Park, so they've done some relatively high profile work before. Fun story about Blue Sky. Remember Superman 64? Well, the developers of that game, who actually owned Blue Sky, tasked them with creating a PS1 version. Allegedly, they were given freedom to completely redesign it for a Sony release, but the Superman license from Warner Bros. Expired and they were unable to secure a new deal, resulting in its cancellation. Critically, Stimpy's Invention seems to have done pretty well for itself. Sure, it may have only had a few reviews, but from what I could find, it sat on a 7.3 out of 10 average. That makes it the 10th highest rated Nickelodeon game of all time. But again, keep in mind that all of this is based on very few reviews. According to Wikipedia, the reviewers at Electronic Gaming Monthly praised the game for its faithful and humorous visuals and audio, but derided the 2-player mode as more aggravating than fun, and twice as hard as a 1-player game. Stimpy's Invention sounds a little more promising than Space Cadet Adventures, but I need to get my own hands on it first before we can truly find out. Before I jump in, make sure you're subscribed. Nickelodeon Video Game History is in full swing now, and next week is going to be huge for the channel. On the 6th of October, Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 comes out, and then 3 days later, Ben 10 Power Trip drops too. My Power Trip review will be going live as soon as possible, and I'm trying to organise the same thing for Nick Kart Racers. To make sure you catch all those exciting reviews, hit that subscribe button. But now, on with the review. If you're a keen Ren and Stimpy fan, you might recognise the name of this game from somewhere else. It's the name of a Season 1 episode, which is actually pretty notable. It's one of the show's most famous episodes, thanks to featuring the Happy Happy Joy Joy song, and it's extremely creepy. This game is very loosely based on it. It takes elements from that episode, but it's not like Blue Sky have recreated that episode in video game form or anything. Surprisingly, when you boot up the game, you'll actually find a difficulty level selection buried away in the options menu. This is something pretty unusual for a platformer, but considering how hard these types of games could be back in the day, it probably came in handy for a lot of kids. On the surface, controls seem very simple. A activates your special moves, B launches your attack, and C is to jump. Again, in the options menu, you can alter the layout of the controls. There's a surprising amount of customization for a game of this genre in this era. Attack-wise, Stimpy's basic attack still sees him spinning, while Ren is taking down enemies with a fly swatter most of the time. Another interesting addition is that you have a health bar, rather than the typical format of dying once you take like 3 or less hits, which is what you see in most 2D platformers. Just booting up the game shows Blue Sky were out to put at least a little bit of a unique spin on Stimpy's Invention, rather than just putting together a stock standard platformer. Once you actually dive into the gameplay, you quickly discover that this is anything but a stereotypical side-scroller. In Space Cadet Adventures, you alternated between controlling Ren and Stimpy for each level, but here you're controlling both at the same time. Thankfully, it's not using that awful Lost Vikings style gameplay that Ed, Edd and Eddy Jawbreakers used. Instead, both of our protagonists will run around together, while offering the ability to switch who's leading the way. It's basically Donkey Kong Country over a year before Donkey Kong Country was ever released. Running around takes a little getting used to at first. There's this weird hybrid thing going on where you're technically controlling both characters, but Ren and Stimpy can become disconnected from one another at times. For example, Ren might make a jump over a gap, but Stimpy may go plummeting to the depths below. Quite often you'll find yourself running around solo as your sort of AI partner attempts to rejoin you. It can be a very strange and jarring gameplay experience, especially early on, but thankfully I found that I ended up adapting to it, and the disconnections between the two characters never really impacted the gameplay. This is largely thanks to Powdered Toast Man, who flies the lost character back to you when they find themselves in a little bit too much trouble. As I mentioned, you can switch primary control between Ren and Stimpy here, but this is done through the pause menu. Every time you want or need to change your character, you have to pause the game. It's a terrible design decision, but thankfully it doesn't really matter. Switching characters is mostly an aesthetic choice and just personal preference, rather than a necessity to progress, so you won't find yourself pausing the game too much. The special move button is both an example of how much depth Blue Sky have tried to add to this game, while also an example of them failing the player. The special move button does a bunch of things. By pressing the button in conjunction with one of the directional buttons, you get a different move. One direction will give you a long jump, a jackhammer, or a move where you throw Ren across the screen. Ren and Stimpy each have unique moves. They all basically function the same, but Blue Sky went to the effort to create different animations that better suit their characteristics. Unfortunately, being dropped into the game with no explanation can be overwhelming thanks to how much is going on. It's not too clear what's happening with the special move button at first. Initially, I thought it was only able to do a long jump. Eventually, I came to a section that required me to do a high jump, and after far too much time spent trying to wrap my head around the game's functionality, I finally figured it out. There's so much going on here with this one simple button. There's another section in this level where you have to dig, and like I said, there are a bunch of attacks linked to it too. Part of me thinks the reason they don't explain any of this is because they don't really use any of it. Outside of the high jump, you really don't need any of these abilities to progress outside of the first level. It's kind of strange. I'll admit, I'm pretty impressed with how many different things Ren and Stimpy can do in what seems like a simple 2D platformer. But damn, it's pretty overwhelming when you first drop into the game. The variety and depth extends to the levels too. As you can see, most of the time you're running left to right, dodging enemies and navigating obstacles. It's a formula as old as time. They don't just stick with that and call it a day though. Next thing you know, you'll be floating through the sky full of helium or speeding downtown on a bike. They've crammed so much in here, but just like the controls, they don't explain anything. These unique sections of levels are fun, once you know what to do. The initial experience of fumbling around trying to get your bearings can be far more frustrating than I'd like. No two levels feel exactly the same in Stimpy's Invention. Not only do they look visually distinct and have radically different layouts, but the mechanics are ever evolving to keep you engaged. There's so much creative level design on display here, and it's given me massive respect for Blue Sky. They clearly have a whole lot of talent. Difficulty wise, I'd say this game is actually harder than Space Cadet Adventures, but at the same time, it's also much more forgiving. The previous Ren and Stimpy game was unfair in so many ways, and the cheapness of its design caused a lot of the difficulty. It also didn't offer a lot of help in terms of health pickups or extra lives. Here, the gameplay is genuinely difficult because it's designed that way. It isn't an annoying byproduct of clueless game design. However, Blue Sky brings in a bunch of quality of life improvements to keep it from getting too frustrating. Firstly, there are level select passwords for the first few levels. While not present for every level in the game, it at least means you can get back to where you were to a degree. There's also a pretty generous checkpointing system. Never once did I get frustrated because I died and was sent back significantly. Much of the difficulty comes from the way they combine the platforming with enemy placement. You really need to get accustomed to the controls and some of your special moves if you want to make it to the finish like a pro. The game is stupidly hard, but the developers often go out of their way to help keep the player from being too daunted by the task in front of them. It's not perfect though. There are moments of cheapness spread throughout the game. They have their own version of the goddamn dog jump scare in Resident Evil 1 when these happy giraffes decide they've had enough of Ren and Stimpy's bullshit out of nowhere. And take something like the bike section. Yeah, it's actually really fun to play, but damn is it extremely unforgiving. Using a health bar makes the challenge a little bit easier to stomach too, but it comes at a cost. Health pickups are like hen's teeth. You've got this nice shiny health bar, but not often are you going to find yourself replenishing it. And in the end, Blue Sky aren't too generous to the player. I was enjoying the fact that when you run out of lives, you just seem to restart the level you were on, rather than being kicked back to the start of the game. The idea that losing all your lives meant you had to start all over again was an annoying predatory design held over from the arcade days, where every choice was made based on how a company could extract the most coins out of a kid. But eventually, you'll find yourself with no lives and being booted back to the start. It was more shocking and frustrating than if they included it right away, because it caught me off guard. You do have the passwords to get to some levels, but like I said, this isn't much help if you're towards the end of the game. Speaking of game length, while Stimpy's Invention features a greater amount of levels, 6 in total, you're probably going to beat it in less time than Space Cadet Adventures. Levels are insanely short. It'll take you around 5 minutes to beat each one once you've got a hang of everything. This is a bit of a bummer because this game has so many genuinely great ideas, but is so incredibly short. I think it needed an extra hour or so to really give itself enough time to be considered a true hidden gem from this era of platformers. Graphically, ooh boy did I love Stimpy's Invention. Obviously being on a home console is going to give them more power to play with, but I thought the graphics were one of the lone highlights in Ren and Stimpy's video game debut. The visuals are on a whole other level here. I genuinely think this is a beautiful game. The environments are gorgeous, Ren and Stimpy look spot on, and most importantly, the game felt like it was part of the wacky world you'd see on TV. Character animations for stuff like the special moves were so well done and fit the duo perfectly. I just couldn't be any more pleased with the visuals of a SEGA Genesis game. And on that same note, the soundtrack bangs too. One of the consistent themes of the latter portion of Cartoon Network video game history was that games consistently had awesome soundtracks. I'm really hoping that trend carries over into Nick. If you somehow don't have 30 minutes to experience this game for yourself, I'd highly recommend chucking on the OST in the background while you're doing something. There's more than a few gems here. I've heard some pretty bad things about the Ren and Stimpy games, and after my terrible experience with Space Cadet Adventures, my expectations for the rest of the franchise were basement level low. However, I think it's extremely clear that a much more competent developer was in charge here. Blue Sky introduces so many interesting and enjoyable quirks that really put their own mark on the genre. It's something that stands out as being totally unique. There are a few issues that needed to be ironed out, but if there was just a bit more content for players, I think this would have gone down as a great game. After 2 mostly disappointing entries on Nintendo consoles, the Sega debut has come through with the goods. Overall, I think Stimpy's Invention is a genuinely fun game. It seems like it's going to be a typical platformer from that era, but surprises you with great quality of life improvements compared to many of its counterparts, and it's bursting with creative ideas. Combined with the beautiful visuals and a catchy soundtrack, I walked away happily surprised by Stimpy's Invention. Next week, you should be getting 2 doses of video game history. Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 is supposed to come out on October 6th. I'm not sure if that's actually going to happen, but stay tuned. And there's also Ben 10 Power Trip. I'll definitely have a Ben 10 Power Trip review ready to go at launch, but for Nick Kart Racers 2, I'm not too sure. The release date seems to be sort of up in the air. There's not a whole lot of promotion and clear messaging going on at the moment, so make sure you keep your eyes peeled to this channel and my Twitter so you can get up to the minute info. And of course, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single video.